What's up, everybody? Thanks as always for supporting the show. It would mean a lot to me if you would take a second to scroll down and hit that subscribe button to the Hoops Tonight YouTube channel, and then follow me on social media on TikTok, Instagram, and Twitter so you guys don't miss any of our content over the course of this season. All right, let's talk some basketball. So I look at Rob as kind of like a smaller version of Malik Monk. He was an overtime elite guy, and then he transferred to Kentucky and was immediately one of the best shot creators in the country. He was 87th percentile among pick and roll players at high volume. He's already a really good pull-up shooter. He's got a deadly floater. He shot 53% of them, shot 53% on them this year at Kentucky. He made some strides as a playmaker. That was his biggest weakness when he was with overtime elite. He basically just dribbling up the floor and shooting every single time. And, you know, we talked to Damian Wilkins on Monday, and he made some good points about the fact that, like, that's what he does, and you want to lean into that. But the growth as a playmaker is important, because if you want to be a sixth man who just comes off the bench and shoots every time, sure. But if you want to be a functional part who plays significant rotation minutes on a great team, you're going to have to be able to play alongside other good basketball players. And he did make some strides in that area of the game at Kentucky. Super explosive off the bounce. He has good start-stop quickness, a deadly like left-handed high hesitation dribble where he'll like come to a complete stop and then shoot out of a cannon. Can really beat people off the dribble. But the big thing that's exciting to me as far as the fit with Minnesota, he is a straight-up deadly off-ball shooter. He shot 50% field goal percentage on unguarded jump shots this year. That came out to 1.48 points per shot. 48% overall field goal percentage on catch-and-shoot jump shots, regardless of whether or not they were guarded. He was a 97th percentile spot-up player. He got 1.3 points per possession. Those are like Michael Porter Jr. type of numbers, right? So the biggest weakness with Rob is that he's small, right? And that can obviously cause some issues for him defensively, but he does play hard and he does compete. He's got a good motor. So like Minnesota makes a ton of sense for me in terms of a fit for Rob, because if you had to construct a team that would allow him to have an achievable defensive role, it would be on a team like this that has multiple elite perimeter defenders and an elite rim protector. Because what that means is Rob is most likely going to be on a movement shooter, like any sort of on-ball dribble creator. You're going to put Ant on. You're going to put Jaden McDaniels on, right? You're going to ask Rob Dillingham to guard a shooter who's either operating on the weak side or maybe occasionally coming off of some screening actions. That's an achievable role for him, right? And then like, yeah, he's going to be attacked in some ball screen situations where they bring his man up into the screen, but he's quick enough to throw a hedge and recover. Again, like that was the thing. What caused issues for Luka in the finals was he's not fast enough to hedge and recover, so he basically has no choice but to guard, and he can't guard. And so it became an issue as Boston continued to get dribble penetration on him. Like when it comes to weak defenders, you just have to have the ability to do something in terms of the game plan. And as long as he can chase shooters around, and as long as he can functionally hedge and recover to protect himself from getting attacked in switches, I think it can work. Not to mention, in terms of in his lock and trail situations, he's going to be in a pretty good spot from the standpoint of having Rudy Gobert behind him and just the overall amount of length and athleticism behind him to kind of anchor him on that end of the floor. And again, he competes, and he competes, and he's got the quickness. Those are things that I think make it doable. Things I like. He's just an absolute flamethrower off-ball scorer. And after what we saw happen to Minnesota in the Dallas series, where Dallas just loads up the strong side and just any of those swing passes to Nickeil Alexander-Walker, Jaden McDaniels, or Kyle Anderson, or whoever, there just wasn't enough off-ball scoring pop to make Dallas pay for loading up the strong side, right? Especially with Rudy Gobert, who can really cause problems for the offense with his inability to catch and finish in traffic around the basket, right? So like Minnesota is uniquely set up to benefit from Rob Dillingham's strengths while also covering for Rob Dillingham's weaknesses. And then in addition to that, he fits a positional need. Mike Conley's 36 years old. He's going to start this year. He's going to be their primary guy in that position, but he can help Rob as a mentor. If Conley has to sit out games, he can slide into that role. And over time, if he shows the ability to compete defensively and shows that his scoring, his flamethrower scoring can help in that backcourt, that could be his spot to take. My one concern, he's not a natural playmaker. He's getting better at it, but it's not a natural thing for him. And I don't love the idea of having your backcourt be two ball handlers that both aren't great passers, right? Like, Ant's getting better, but that's not his natural strength either. And I would argue that overall ball movement in that 5-man grouping for Minnesota is one of their biggest weaknesses offensively, right? That's how you beat teams that load up the strong side. We talked about this a lot yesterday when we were kind of breaking down some of the 5-out stuff. Like, you need to get the ball side to side. Imagine it like this. If you have the 3-point line and everyone's loaded up on the strong side, you need to get the ball to the other side so that defense has to shift. And with multiple side to side shifts, that's where you can find cracks in the defense that you can take advantage of. And you're just not going to get those opportunities unless you have a certain amount of playmaking on the floor. So that's my one concern. But that's another thing that, like, if Rob can get better at it in the long run, especially under Mike Conley's tutelage, it makes a lot of sense. And I do like the off-ball scoring piece, and Ant's development as a playmaker will help a lot in that regard as well. Okay, the Grizzlies and Zach Edey. I want to look at this from two angles first. I want to talk about Zach Edey kind of in a vacuum as an NBA player, and then we'll talk about his fit in Memphis. Can Zach Edey play in the NBA? That's the big debate that everyone's been talking about over the last few weeks. And it's a lot of like radical, like he's going to be awesome or he's not going to be able to play at all. And to me, the answer is really simple. He'll certainly be able to play in some matchups. When he can run drop coverage on defense, meaning against teams that can't really force him to guard in space and teams that can't run him off the floor in transition, when he's in those situations, he won't just be playable, he'll be good because he's huge. And he's a smart basketball player who knows how to use his size. On offense, he'll set great screens and he'll roll into the lane for deep seals and buckets around the rim. And on defense, he's going to protect the paint and clean up the defensive glass. He is a functional big man when he's able to be close to the rim and when he can't be capitalized on in space, right? But he's definitely going to struggle against the pace and space type of teams that can run him up and down the floor and force him to guard on the perimeter. But this is something that Memphis is set up to deal with. Memphis can function as a team with Jaren Jackson at the 5 and with Jaren Jackson at the 4, right? Especially with the rise of GG Jackson, who I really like as a forward that can shoot the ball that you put next to Jaren Jackson in their smaller looks. You can actually see it all work together, right? Like, here's Memphis in a matchup against Minnesota, a team that you can load up the strong side against, and you're not as worried about Rudy Gobert forcing Edey to guard in space, or Minnesota like just kind of running up and down the floor in transition, right? Like in those situations, you go big. It's Edey at the 5. It's Jaren Jackson at the 4, operating as the low man. You can allow Edey to be aggressive on the ball handler and use his length to kind of swarm there. Jaren Jackson's running that back line. You have GG Jackson as another layer of athleticism on the wing, or maybe you can go smaller with that group and have Smart, Bane, and Ja Morant out there. But if you're playing against the Golden State Warriors or the Indiana Pacers, a team that's really going to like force Edey to cover a ton of ground and really kind of expose some of his quickness issues, that's where it might make more sense to take him out of the lineup, go with Jaren Jackson at the 5, GG Jackson at the 4 with Smart, Bane, and Ja Morant, right? Like the idea here is like Edey is only going to be functional in the NBA in certain types of situations, but those specific types of situations are the only situations that Memphis is really looking at to use Edey anyway. And so the fit makes a ton of sense. When Memphis can load up the strong side and keep Edey by the rim, he's their big look. When they can't, they have Jaren Jackson and his ability to play at the 5, and they can put a lineup out there with Jaren Jackson, GG Jackson, Bane, Smart, and Ja Morant, where they just have a ton of perimeter speed, the ability to contain on the ball, plenty of offensive skill and spacing, right? So, like, it makes a ton of sense. And, like, I actually think Memphis is going to be a dominant regular season team next year. Like, I think they're going to be right back in that. I wouldn't be surprised at all if Memphis got a top 4 seed next year. So, like, Edey's going to have a small and achievable role alongside good role players. I love the fit. I'm excited to watch Edey play in Memphis.